People are getting beat up in their homes. There's a state of exception or emergency currently going on in the country where the government has special powers to crack down on criminal organizations, which they are doing.
Of what's going on in the jails. But the prisons were run by the prisoners, and there were literally gang members who had, suites and like luxury and, video games, and, they had prostitutes going in and out of the prisons, and there were cars in some of the prisons.
The household debt per person in Ecuador is about $1,100 USD. In comparison to the US, 50x.
More or less.
Yeah. That's 5,000% increase. Ecuador's on the USD, but it's really the EUSD. It's a separate currency because of the way it acts in reality. From an inflation perspective, from a buying power perspective.
Why is this 50-hectare property that's beautiful and has everything worth this low number, and this little crappy lot, out by the airport worth tiny, worth 50 grand or whatever, right? Like what? Like this doesn't make any sense to me. We started Abundant Living. That was sort of the motive or the motivation to start the company.
I feel like even our haters are courteous.
Yeah,
Most of them.
Yeah, we got some courteous haters. We appreciate all haters.
Oh, we're done already?
We're done already. That's it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Carlitos, y Brandon. How's it going, guys?
You looked at me when you said Brandon.
I did. I apologize. Welcome back to the show, guys. Thanks for being here. Right now, take a moment. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. We already know you're going to like the episode, so hit the like button right now. Hit the bell, because we do a lot of content. Carl put out a video. It's getting very positive comments. Watching him tool around the river. I don't know why anyone would want to see that, but they do. So no, but we put out a lot of content, so hit the bell so you're notified when new content comes out. And come down and join us on April 12th. Boom! To the 21st for our Vilcabamba Lifestyle Retreat. This is our 6th, I believe, Vilcabamba Lifestyle Retreat. 9 days. It's a blast. You learn everything. You see everything. You're going to have a great time. Come join us. Link in the description. Okay.
You're feeling good today, huh?
I'm feeling a little peppy, man. I was actually hanging out with a friend last night, who brought back $5,000 worth of tea from Europe, from one shop in France, I believe, that is the only shop in Europe that that has these kinds of teas. And he was going for other reasons, but he brought back a suitcase worth of tea, which is like this thousands-year-old lineage Chinese this and that tea. And it was lovely. I think I might still be feeling a little peppy.
Do you remember what it was called?
I do not. I would not.
I wasn't going to ask. I knew the answer.
You did.
But you didn't get any problems at the customs. That's surprising. That's a lot of
tea. Yeah, I didn't ask. He didn't say, but I don't. Is
that a lot of tea, or is it like some teas are like really expensive?
Yeah, this is really expensive. I don't know.
So maybe
it might not have been that
$5,000 worth of this type of tea is not that much.
Yeah, but it was lovely. As soon as I drank it, like it tasted really good. It was kind of like earthy, but good. And as soon as I drank it, it was like immediately just kind of like, It was like this calm.
Okay.
Green tea.
So, I don't know, man. I have no idea.
Well, what color was it?
I didn't see the actual, but in the pot or like in the thing that he was serving, it was sort of like.
Was it a cup? Did you have a cup?
It was like this whole process.
All right, but what did you drink out of? That's kind of.
I drank out of this very small bowl.
So in the bowl, did you look in the bowl to see what color?
I was getting there. It was like a deep.
Well, we got comments, man. Like, get to the point, Jesse Bear.
Mostly brown, like reddish earth tone.
Okay.
Does that work?
So then it's probably not a green tea.
Yeah.
Hey!
Which I think black tea is really green tea that's fermented differently, right? Or aged.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't expect to be talking about tea today. But all right. So we're going to talk today about a bunch of stuff. We're going to hit on some economic stuff. Brandon's got some really good numbers, I think, that paint an interesting comparison between here and some other places, the U.S. in particular. We're going to get into life here, pressure, culture, and that kind of that sort of slowing down that Ecuador engenders. We are going to give an update on.
We should coin, what that feeling is. That the $5,000 tea feeling. What is that feeling?
Yes. We're going to talk about the updates on the crackdown on the cartels and crime. Give some statistics on that, and then we may or may not get into some stuff in terms of just how the business started, how we run our business, and what that looks like here. And if we somehow make it through all of that, we may get to a hater's comment, which we have been trying to get to for a couple of weeks.
Wow, we always, and I never say always, but we always overestimate how much we're going to cover in the podcast.
Yes.
Like, we're going to probably get through like half of that, maybe.
And don't say in the comments that's because we babble a lot. It's not. It's, I swear. All right. So let's jump right into it. I think, let's see. Where do we want to start? Let's start. Yeah, you want to start with that stuff, Carl? You have that ready to go? All right. Sure. So Ecuador is, in fact, we should probably do 5 minutes on just like an overall safety update as well. Maybe 2 minutes. We'll see. But so Ecuador is in the middle of a crisis, so to speak. Probably all of you are aware of that. We've covered it extensively. We've done a couple of full episodes on it, where the government is cracking down on organized crime. There's a state of exception or emergency currently going on in the country where the government has special powers to crack down on criminal organizations, which they are doing. Since then, we've seen really extraordinary reduction in crime overall in the country. We've seen a lot of arrests.
Particularly violent crime.
Yeah. We've seen a ton of arrests, ton of people being detained, etc. So that's kind of, going on probably the three close to 4 weeks, I would say at this point.
Uh-huh. Yep. 4 weeks, definitely.
4 weeks.
Okay. And the BOA just announced that he's extending the state of exception 30 days.
Yeah, so it couldn't have been more than 4 weeks because it just was doing that. So somewhere around there. And then I just want to give, and we'll jump into those stats. I just wanted to give a quick update just kind of on safety in this region, right? So we've talked about this a lot. We're coming out with an interview. I think just about every interview I do, we at least discuss that a little bit. We're coming out with another interview of an asambleísta, which is a congressman or assembly member that should be out in probably the next couple of weeks. But, Ecuador traditionally was uniquely safe, right? It was kind of like one of the safer countries on Earth. And this region in particular was, absurdly safe for the first many years I was here. Loja was the safest city that I had ever visited in my life. Then we had a wave of immigration around 2020. There's lots of reasons. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but there's lots of reasons as to why the country has gotten less safe over the last few years. But we had some immigration. In this region, you started to see different types of people than you saw before. Like, this culture is very close knit. It goes back generations. They have certain mannerisms. They look a certain way in general. They talk a certain way. They're accustomed to life being, in a certain way. And there was an influx of people that, didn't share those customs and values and belief systems necessarily into the area. You started to see in Loja stuff you'd never, ever, ever seen before. Mm-hmm. People on the street, people asking for money. There was no such thing as that previously. Not a big problem in Loja at all, but it's sort of closer to a normal city with that now. Whereas one of the shocking things for the first years here was that didn't exist in a 250,000 person city or a 200,000 person city at the time. And then we started to see an increase in crime over the last, I'm terrible with time, but maybe a year or two or a couple of years. We started to see an increase in crime. And, that hasn't been dramatic necessarily in this area, but it definitely has affected the community and the foreign community. So there was a lady that we've done an episode on this as well, but a lady who was murdered. And then there's been ongoing break-ins that seem to be basically targeted towards elderly folks who are relatively isolated and don't have much, if any, security. And it's tragic. Like, it's people are getting beat up in their homes and stuff's getting stolen. And, you know, they're people that there's a very small community, so it's people everybody knows. And that, you know, that's kind of continued here to happen. You know, again, it'll be, you know, it'll happen. There'll be a robbery and then another one at some point, but they've been happening. You know, normally in the past when there would be robberies and stuff like that, it'd be like a wave, and then people would stop it, and then that would be over, and you'd go back to total safety for a year or two or more. But this has gone on for a little while now, so that is happening. It's something to be aware of. You know, I think Carl's going to put out a video overall on like safety tips and advice and just how to do that. We'll continue to share some of that stuff on the channel, but you know, the basics are just, you know, have good neighbors, have some security, have a dog, blah blah blah, and all the kind of normal stuff.
Right.
Don't live, you know, sort of with money wide open,
Sure.
Without the ability to defend yourself, because you could become a target. So
Yep.
that's that. All right, you want to jump into?
Do as the Ecuadorians do, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
Basically,
do as the Ecuadorians do.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, home security is a big deal. I'll do an episode or an educational video about that. You know, just little tips and things that we're doing and that most people here are doing. And these types of properties that have those things typically don't get robbed. So
yeah. Hey, before you jump in, Carl, I just looked up the state of exception. So it looks like Noboa announced this past Saturday that he will extend the state of emergency for 30 days beginning March 8th when the current declaration ends. And he said that this is the Deputy Minister of Government, Esteban Torres, said that this extension is particularly important for maintaining control of the prisons, because they've done all these different arrests that you're gonna share, but they really want to make sure that they control the prisons, and that's, you know, militarily. So that's a slippery slope with police state and that kind of stuff. But this is kind of the playbook that Bukele did in El Salvador, militarizing the prisons in a way to maintain control of these violent, you know, drug trafficking criminals, etc.
Definitely. Yeah. No, the whole cartels, my understanding in Ecuador, is run through the prisons. It was. Now, what the government is doing is impressive, and there's a lot of image and footage and of what's going on in the jails. But the prisons were run by the prisoners, and there were literally gang members who had, you know, suites and like luxury and, you know, video games, and, you know, they had prostitutes going in and out of the prisons, and there were cars in some of the prisons, like wild stuff. So they've completely put an end to that, from what I understand. I've seen footage where they cleaned out the prisons. They removed everything that was not supposed to be there, and there were piles and piles of stuff that wasn't supposed to be there. The inmates started repainting and cleaning, and, you know, so it looks like they cleaned out the prisons for sure. So let's jump into some statistics
just
here.
Real quick on that, they were even doing stuff, and there was like family members of prisoners protesting and stuff, but they were even doing stuff where they were, and I think Bukele's done things like this as well, where they were not feeding them in order to stop crime from happening that's directed from the prison. And they've been doing things like that as well.
Yeah. So, someone's calling. All right, decline. So, let's see here. This is the first statistic. We'll put those on the screen. This is probably the most significant one. I mean, there's a lot. There's other ones, but this one, I'm trying to figure out what it exactly means. It says 54,393.69 drugs confiscated. So it doesn't tell you grams or tons or kilos or whatever. Now, I was trying to do some math, because I know they confiscated 23 tons of cocaine just in one operation, and that in pounds is 50,000 pounds. So I don't think this is pounds.
No.
I don't think it's pounds. It might be.
Maybe it's in events. Maybe it's like they took drug. No, it's too many times. Not 54,000.
It could be
pounds.
pounds.
I have no idea.
I mean, pounds of.
But if they got 50,000 in one shot, well, that could be. They only got 4,000. Yeah, it's probably pounds.
It's probably pounds.
It could be, but pounds is kind of a strange metric to use. I feel.
Well, they got a lot
pound
of
of cocaine is a lot of cocaine. Like a whole pound, like it's really a pretty large, a significant amount. So, anyways, usually when they confiscate drugs here, they go by doses. You know, they confiscate 10,000 doses, but they're like 1 gram doses. So anyways, but it is very significant. My understanding from what I've read, the amount of drugs that's been confiscated is never seen before. Like these are like large amounts of drugs, and you know, they destroy it allegedly. So, but it's worth a lot of money. That's kind of the point. Is like it's definitely hitting the cartels to where it hurts, which is, you know, their bottom line, their funds. And so they've confiscated a lot of drugs. 8,884 people were detained. 109,000 operations. So that's quite a bit. What else we got here that's important? Almost 3,800 knives were confiscated. 2,639 firearms. 28 boats. 1,200, almost 1,300 magazines, ammunition, chargers, 12,462 explosives, $213,000 confiscated, 181,000 munitions confiscated, 979 vehicles, 1,008 motorcycles, 4,128 cell phones, 51,097 gallons of gasoline or gasoline and diesel, probably both. That's basically, those are the most important statistics.
109,000 operations is what they're claiming?
Yeah, 109,000, yeah. 109.
So if that is 54,000 pounds, so they're getting like a half a pound per operation.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, 50,000 would have been in one.
Just right, but if there's 54,000 total, so then it's even less.
Well, these are operations for all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. But if you go...
Can I have fun too?
Sorry, I didn't know what you were talking about.
So Presidencia Ecuador on X, on Twitter, is the channel. If you want to subscribe to it, Presidencia Ecuador comes up with new statistics all the time. They're, you know, really showcasing what they're doing. And actually, there's something else here. I guess there was some kind of flooding somewhere on the coast. Maybe you heard about this.
It was flooding in Loja.
But it was something significant there, I think, like a pretty major flood. Loja wasn't like a crisis or anything.
I mean, the streets, did you see some of those videos from Loja?
No.
We should put some of the videos.
That happens not annually, but that happens frequently. Like there's these two rivers that run through Loja, and the bottom one occasionally breaches its banks.
I mean, it was coming down this road. Like I saw a video from the bottom of the road. Oh, okay. The water is, I mean, it's like a river coming down the road with debris, and there's cars trying to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I mean, it didn't look like, oh my God, it was life-threatening type of thing. Maybe there was something on the coast that was tragic, but this was definitely the most water I've seen on video from Loja anytime.
Yeah, so the government's also showcasing, you know, the humanitarian help that they're sending to the places that have been affected by flooding, which there's I don't know exactly where, but I know some places on the coast, maybe Chone or some of those coastal cities have been flooded pretty badly.
So we finally got the El Nino stuff starting to play out a little
that's
bit.
happening.
As predicted by you.
That's what they said, yeah. We'll put it in the link down below, the Presidencia Ecuador Twitter channel. There's also the Ejército Ecuatoriano. And like, to me, anytime I look, like, I find it's wild the amount of photos and videos daily, almost hourly, of like those operations, basically. Mm-hmm. And you always have, you know, the people arrested there and all this stuff on tables that they've confiscated. And, you know, there's some random stuff like kitchen knives, you know, and things that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, a lot of drugs, a lot of weapons, you know, and all that stuff. So it's quite impressive, the amount of work that the Ecuadorian government is putting into this since the beginning of the state of emergency.
Yeah, and like Ecuador is a super small country. So if you've lived here for a while, you know, you have connections to just about any piece of information you could ever want, or relationship you could ever want, or those kinds of things. So
do you remember that Kevin Bacon game? It's like 7 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
With Kevin Bacon. He's been in a movie with, you know, you can get there in like so many steps by any other actor in the world. Back to Kevin Bacon.
Well, how about all the presidents being related except for one that little girl figured out?
But that's like Ecuador. Ecuador's like a real life example of that.
Exactly. Now there may be other reasons for those presidents, but right. So like you know, if there was a military operation going on in the U.S., you know, you wouldn't be able to get like inside info easily, right? Like you'd have to have a buddy who happened to be that, you know, you'd have to have something like that. You just have lots of people speculating about it, and there'd be wild rumors, and there'd be all kinds of, you know, innuendo, whatever. Anyways, here, hearing from people who are part of the operations, and also talking again to Jorge Penafiel, who's the assembleísta. I don't even know how to say that well in English. Congressman, I guess.
Congressman.
Who's the congressman here. The consensus seems to be that these efforts are going very well, that they're serious about it, that it's a sustained and serious effort, and it's going to take a while. I don't think anyone thinks we're a month away or 6 months away or maybe even a year away from this being over and done. There's going to be, an ongoing process. Zero operations of any kind in this region. So just to be clear about that,
true,
none of this is going on here whatsoever.
Yeah.
This is on the coast, around the ports, probably in Quito as well. I don't know outside of that if there's other places, but essentially the coast.
Yeah, another interesting statistic. Early on during when the beginning of this conflict, I've heard from a few sources that they estimated there was 30,000 gang members in Loja. In Ecuador. There was around 30,000 gang members in Ecuador, and there's already been almost 9,000 arrests. So that kind of maybe gives you an idea of what's going on. Like almost a third of those gang members been arrested. There's still quite a bit, quite a bit more people, but still, they're definitely putting a lot of pressure on them and arresting a lot of people.
Yeah, and I've seen some public sentiment polls on Twitter from Ecuador that it seems like overwhelmingly people are happy. Ecuadorian citizens are happy with Noboa. They're happy. He's getting positive poll results, like overwhelmingly positive. And he just recently confirmed, because he's kind of been on the CNN interview he did a while ago, and they asked him, is he going to run for reelection? And he's kind of hedging, and he came out and confirmed that he is
going to run. Yeah.
He is going to run. So, it seems like there's people that don't like what he's doing, and there's some people that have issues with any politician. But it seems like overwhelmingly, at least on the data that I saw, he's overwhelmingly popular, and people are happy with the direction he's taken the country. So.
Yeah.
Those elections will be coming up soon because they did the death cross, and this is only like an 18-month term or something. I don't remember exactly how long, but he only had like a year and a half, somewhere around there, to be in power, and then we'll have elections for a 4-year term. So unless something dramatically changes between now and then, he will be elected for sure. All right, so that is that. I wanted to tell sort of the quick story, which plays into some people having questions about kind of how we operate and how we work. I want to tell a quick story of sort of like setting up the company and what it was like when we got here, and because everything we do now is born out of that, right? So I get down here with a business partner in 2013. Carl is already here, having a good time in Vilcabamba, enjoying the single life, I'm sure, at that time. And the Rainbow Vest days, I believe, as well. We shared that a few times. I guess I'm beating the joke into the ground, but I get down here in 2013. We come down to do a project, right? So we wanted to buy land and do a big project. So we spent the first kind of year we were here, whatever it was, looking for land, right? And the process at that time, in this region of Ecuador, there was essentially no real estate companies in Loja. Like there was a couple, like now there's a ton. There was a couple at that time. They were just working in the city. Nobody was taking on listings anywhere out in the rural areas. And then Vilcabamba had a few real estate companies, but they weren't very serious. They were kind of like, they had a couple listings. They had stuff that they had listed that wasn't for sale. When you asked them a question, they needed to find out, then they wouldn't have their information updated or anything like that. So the process was essentially, unless you were going to be like in Vilcabamba or in Loja, the city, the process was essentially tour the region like by yourself and talk to people. That was basic, so it was such an unwieldy process. I mean, it was wild. Like you're in towns, if they're big enough, talking to taxi drivers, talking to store owners, like see if there's a sign somewhere, se vende, you stop and check it out. But basically properties were sold through word of mouth and mostly within the area they were in. So like if you're from Quito, you can't go online and check out rural properties in this region. Like it was not possible. Like it didn't exist. And so And then as we went through our due diligence process, like we were probably what a lot of you guys will be at some point, who are watching this, or some of you, we were non-Spanish speaking foreigners who have no idea how anything works here, trying to figure it all out. Mm-hmm. So we're meeting with lawyers, and we're English speaking lawyers, and we're trying to understand the laws around real estate. We're trying to understand the due diligence process. We're trying to understand, like, what are the things we have to watch out for? How does titles work? How does all this stuff work? And some of the answers we're getting back, like everything in Ecuador, are both wild and not the same.
Contradictory.
Right. So one lawyer is telling you this and another lawyer is telling you that. And, you ask different questions in different ways and get totally different answers and all that kind of stuff. So we did like thorough due diligence, actually way more thorough than necessary, but I didn't understand yet. We did thorough due diligence on probably half a dozen to a dozen properties in that year of trying to understand the state of the title, the boundaries, the ownership, what's actually there. Back then, this is less so now, much less so now, but back then, you could buy a property that the owner said, it's 50 hectares, and the title says 40, and it's really 100, or it's 100 hectares, and the title says 80. And it's really 40. Like, this was common back then. You could, there was all kinds of stuff going on, right? So water rights, access rights, how does all that stuff work? Like, on and on and on. So once we had gone through that due diligence process on however many properties, probably close to double digits, if not double digits, my business partner at the time, Darnell, is like, we should open a real estate company, right? Like, why not help this process function better? Now we understand, like, what are the risks, and we can help buyers and sellers find each other, and we can facilitate that process and make it smooth and easy and transparent, and we can really protect buyers and actually create a market that doesn't exist right now, because again, like, no one's even heard of this area or region, I should say. Even the country at that time, most people hadn't heard of, but certainly not this region. And if you are interested, and you're online, there's nothing. Like, you can't, right? So we're like, okay, let's, this place is amazing. Like, we're like completely in love with the area by then. Let's take these beautiful properties and showcase them and help buyers and sellers find each other and create an actual standardized sort of real estate process that doesn't exist. So at that time, again, like, sort of real estate commissions existed, but they were going to taxi drivers. They were going to, like, people in the town who were a hub of information.
Kind of like a finder's fee?
Like a finder's fee. Yeah. And there was a lot of weird stuff going on. Like, so somebody, the literally, like, the costumbre, like the custom basically was at that time was the seller would tell whoever they were telling how much they want for the property. So, okay, like, this property, I want 50,000. And he means it, and that's it. Like, that's his number. He's not going to take any less. He doesn't want more. Like, that's his number. It's not a negotiating point to start with. It's like his number. And then the taxi driver or whatever, he's going to go try to sell it for 55 or 60 or 80 in some unscrupulous cases. And, like, he's just going to go try to get something on top of that. And then there's going to be this, like, weird thing between the three people, the seller, buyer, and whoever else is involved, where the guy who's involved is trying to get the money without letting everyone know how much money it is. And it's like, it was like a very shady thing. And then nobody was overseeing the interests of the buyer at all, right? In terms of the title and the access and the rights and the water rights and all that kind of stuff. So this was the situation. It was wild, right? And even titles back, again, the size of the property, like, you had no idea unless you measured it yourself. So during that time, again, Darnell comes up with this idea, and we launch Abundant Living Ecuador. No understanding due diligence process, but nothing else. Like still having no really sense of the market. There's no comps here. So until you've been in all these areas for an extensive period of time and understand what prices are in those areas, like, you don't know. Like, someone could tell you anything, and you don't really, and it doesn't, even valuation here, it started to make sense for me after 2 or 3 years, but for the first 2 or 3 years, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, why is this 50 hectare property that's beautiful and has everything, worth this low number, and this little crappy lot, out by the airport worth tiny, worth 50 grand or whatever, right? Like what, like this doesn't make any sense to me. Now it does, now I understand it. But at that time, right, there's no comps, you don't know. So we started Abundant Living. That was sort of the motive or the motivation to start the company. Standardize the real estate process, help buyers and sellers find each other, protect buyers' interests in, as they go through the research and due diligence process and so on and so forth. So I say all that just to share the story, but also, people want to understand like how our business is run. It's not run any different today than sort of like those principles it was founded on then, right? So we're actually the ones in this region that introduced percentage-based commissions, right? So and this, I had a very hard time explaining this to a lot of sellers at the beginning, especially like campesinos, like folks out from the country. Like they didn't know what I was talking about. When I'm like, no, like you don't tell me your price and I try to sell it for more. Like you pay us a percentage. That's our job. Like we're gonna try to sell your property. You're hiring us to do this job. We're gonna market it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna research this. We're gonna research that. We're gonna help the buyers with all this. We're going to market it all over the world. We're going to, right? We're kind of explaining that process to them, and we get a cut, like we get a percentage, right? So, again, we kind of introduced that to this region. I'm not saying no one had ever done it in the history of the region, but it was not common practice at all. And a lot of people like didn't want that. A lot of people were like, no, like, what do you, they were just looking at me like almost blank stare, like, no, like I want 50,000. I'm like, okay. Like we'll list it at 58 and they'll negotiate and we'll see where the offers come in. And my job is just to present you with the offers and you accept them or you don't. And they're like, well, no, I just want 50,000. Okay. Kind of stuff like that was, a lot of conversations like that. And so, yeah, so at this point in Ecuador, you don't have, at least rural Ecuador, you don't have an established system even to this day, right, of that, how that process works. Buyer's agent, seller's agent, listing, you have the broker and then the agents underneath and they list the property and then it goes on MLS and then it's a free for all and every agent has access to it and then those agents are basically the buyer's agent and they bring the buyer and then there's a negotiation and there's lawyers involved and there's the buyer and seller's agent, the buyer's and seller's lawyer. And, and there's a title company and there's, it's a whole process from back home. You don't have any of that here. Like nothing that I just mentioned. You don't have any of that in the rural areas, right? So to solve for that, we created a due diligence process. We created an escrow company because traditionally deposits were held by sellers, which was risky because they would spend the money. So if the agreement was you give it back, they'd be like, yeah, I'll give it back. But that, that could be 3 years from now when they have the money. And they're very honest, like they will give it back. But if they don't have it, they don't have it. And that was frequent. So we created an escrow company and, we operate again the same way. So we'll list a property. We'll have a contract with the seller. The seller will, whatever that agreement is, we get a percentage of the overall sale. And then we will then represent essentially the buyer, through the process because our job is to protect their interests. Mm-hmm. We have to, that's how our business is set up. So we're going to give full disclosure on everything. We're going to give them all the information. We're going to show them all the pitfalls and what possibly could, they might not like. And we're going to help them with the entire due diligence process. And we're going to give them information on, and sellers who are hearing this and thinking this is nuts. I'm sorry, there isn't another way to do it to protect both sides here, right? So we're going to give people information, right? So if a buyer is asking us, like, is this price flexible? Is it not? We're going to tell them, we're going to tell them what we know about that. We're going to tell them what we think in terms of valuation. We don't take listings on that we think are not, not in line with the market price. And this is the way we do it. Mm-hmm. So again, this may sound insane coming from back home. I can totally understand that. Yeah. We created this market here. We operate like beyond ethically. And there isn't another way to do it that makes any sense. If there aren't buyer's agents, they don't exist. So, you can't, it's not like you're going to come with someone else who's going to protect your interests. Even if they did, even if you have an agent that's working for you, they don't do any of the stuff we do. Right. They're not checking any of the due diligence we do. They're not recommending you the right lawyers. They're not doing any of that, even if you could find one who, to help you in that process.
I think part of what drives the market to be that way is because of the cycle. The real estate cycle, and we've talked about this before. It's not debt driven primarily, right? So in the West, in the United States, you see these cycles that are much faster and much more boom and bust because everybody gets a mortgage. So it's like, hey, the cycle, there's way more buyers, there's way more sellers, there's tons of volume. There's more volume in the cycle because it's driven by debt. Here, it's not like that. So the cycles are more drawn out, they're longer, they're slower, there's not as much volume. So there's not it's almost like supply and demand. You can't sustain yourself as a business doing if somebody just wanted to be a buyer's agent in a rural area, good luck.
They would never have a sale.
Right, exactly. So because of the volume of transactions, that's part of why, we have to operate that way, is because of volume. It's not like this region is, going into bidding wars, and there's, like you have in the West in the cities where you put your property up for sale and in 3 days you got 5 offers competing. It's a different market. It's a really important point. Yeah. So it's just,
I've seen great deals sit for 6 to 12 months.
Right.
Screaming deals. Like, I want to buy them. I'm like, wow, this is an incredible opportunity. And it sits on the market for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that is fueled by the debt thing. So anything else you guys want to add on that before we change subjects? All right. All right. Let's jump into, Brandon has some, so you've had some great conversations in the comments. Last week we were talking about debt and currencies, and what happens in a dollar dollar inflation environment, or devaluing, however you say that, environment. That was fun. I enjoyed that sort of topic. We got a lot of interesting comments. You've been kind of diving in on some of that on YouTube and having some interesting backs and forths with folks. And I know one of the things that came out of that was people were interested in some statistics in terms of per capita debt levels, which turned out to be really telling as you research that. So let's jump into that, and we're going to tie that in kind of to pressure in life and the culture here. Yeah. But let's start there.
Yeah, but before we do that, I just wanted to share this quick. NABOA and the administration just negotiated a new trade agreement with Costa Rica. And again, this is for exports. So it's good for Ecuador because, economically, Costa Rica is much more mature of an economic country, or a developed country than Ecuador. So their GDP per capita is probably double Ecuador, right? So the fact that they were able to negotiate this trade agreement on some of these not natural resources, but these exports that Ecuador has, furniture, ceramics, things like that are commonly made here. The trade agreement into Costa Rica, for example, they were decreasing duties from 15% down to 0 on some of these furniture items, stoves, some other things, and then even on ceramics, they're dropping 3% from 15% for the next 5 years down to 0. So the Ecuadorian goods into Costa Rica, which again is a much more developed country, there's tons of Westerners that have kind of moved in. It's kind of become like a California, West Keys kind of style environment. So now the demand for those, the prices on those are going to be less expensive in Costa Rica. Theoretically would allow for more export sales for Ecuador. So I thought that was kind of cool that they did that in a small way. And again, Ecuador is a small country, Costa Rica is a small country, but relatively that's a big deal.
And just sort of some bigger picture stuff on that too. There's been a lot of trade deals that were negotiated in the last few years during Lasso's time, possibly Moreno's as well, which have, and then Lasso in particular got rid of a ton of import taxes.
Right.
So you're having, more availability at better prices of all kinds of stuff in Ecuador than when Carl and I were here at the beginning, it was like they have layaway plans for stuff that should be $50 because it's 200, or 3. I remember looking for a grill in the early years and going into Todo Hogar, and like a crappy Weber grill that would be like $80 or something, or $100, it's like $400 or
Wow.
So that's not the case anymore because of these trade deals, which is, it's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. You were mentioning Ecuador. People, when you and Darnell first came, and most people didn't know about Ecuador. Even still, I still think most people don't know about Ecuador. When I went back recently, probably 9 out of 10 people that I asked couldn't even show me on a map where Ecuador was. And if I asked them what do they know about Ecuador, the only thing that most people knew was Galapagos.
Right.
That was it. That's the only thing most people know about is the Galapagos Islands, and they don't know where it is on a map. That's so I think that's a pretty common. Most people don't know much about Ecuador at all. All right, well, you're about to learn some more about Ecuador. All right, so let's.
Excellent transition.
Yeah. All right, so I got to put my my corrected vision on here to read this for you guys. So I did some research into some statistics. So a lot of the statistics aren't readily available like we have in the States, but I was able to calculate some metrics that I want to share with you guys on debt that are very interesting. So we looked at household debt in Ecuador, which is generally mortgages, credit cards, student loans, car loans, personal loans from the United States. It would be that kind of thing. In Ecuador, mortgages aren't as common, student loans aren't common, car loans are a little more common, personal loans are a little more common, but it's that type of debt. It's individual household debt. So, and then we also looked at national government debt. So national government debt is essentially federal debt held by individuals, corporations, and local governments, Federal Reserve banks, foreign governments, stuff like that. All right, so I'm going to share with you the calculation here. So in Ecuador, the current total household debt in the country is about $20 billion. $20 billion in current household debt. And the population of Ecuador is approximately 18.3 million people. So if we just do a simple math, the household debt per person in Ecuador is about $1,100 USD per person. $1,100 in household debt per person. In comparison to the US, which has $17.5 trillion in household debt, with a population of approximately 341 million, the household debt per person in the United States is $51,300. So from 1,100 to 51,300. I mean, that's
50x.
50x.
More or less.
Yeah, that's 5,000% increase, right? Okay, so then when you consider the national debt in Ecuador is 69.5 billion in national debt, divided by the population is approximately $3,800 in national debt per person in Ecuador. In the United States, the national debt is 34.3 trillion, and that doesn't include unfunded liabilities like Social Security, Medicare, federal employee.
Which Ecuador essentially doesn't even have.
Right.
There's some of that here, but a tiny fraction.
Right. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare, federal employee and veteran benefits, those types of things aren't even included in the 34 trillion. And just to get a grasp of what those are, the most recent estimates that show that we're a $105 trillion deficit over the next 75 years, or about a 1.4 trillion deficit per year to cover those unfunded liabilities. So the on the books liabilities, 34.3 trillion divided by the 341 million population gives us about $100,000 in national debt per person in the United States. So
it's about 3,000 for Ecuador.
Yeah, about 3,800. So when you combine national debt and household debt in the United States, it's about $152,000 per person in the United States, compared to Ecuador, which is $4,900.
It's almost like they need a financial reset.
Yeah, yeah.
Given those numbers.
And there's some interesting things, man. Like the U.S. interest expense alone on national debt has exceeded $650 billion annually. Nice. The interest expense, the carrying costs of the debt of the U.S. government is $650 billion annually. And since the debt ceiling was lifted by Congress, the U.S. deficit has grown by $2.5 trillion. It took 225 years for the U.S. to accrue $6 trillion in debt. And we've more than doubled that $6 trillion in new debt in less than 3 years.
Yeah.
Like,
it's wild.
It's wild, and this is another thing I want to share. I've shared this before, but in today's day and age, we throw around numbers like billions, trillions, very casually, but the differences are significant. Like this is one of the best analogies to really drive home the differences between relative sizes of numbers, and it illustrates the near exponential growth from millions to billions to trillions. And it's converting it into time. Mm-hmm. So 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. Like right. That's the magnitude. Right. That's the exponential difference between these numbers relatively. So when we're throwing around, 650 billion in interest expense alone, or an additional 6 trillion of debt that took us 225 years to come up with, we just doubled that in new debt in 3 years. It's almost incomprehensible how out of control this is. And then you compare that to Ecuador, and wait a second, I thought Ecuador was on the US dollar. We're on the US dollar? They're on the US is on the same dollar. They inflate. It's all about inflation and money creation and devaluation of the dollar. But in Ecuador, the household national debt is less than $5,000 per person. In the United States, it's $150,000, but we're on the same currency. And that's kind of goes to illustrate that even though the United States is on the we have the USD, and Ecuador is on the USD, but it's really different. It acts different fundamentally. It doesn't inflate the same way. It's like what did you call it? The EUSD, Carl, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the USD, Ecuador's on the USD, but it's really the EUSD. It's a separate currency because of the way it acts in reality. From an inflation perspective, from a buying power perspective.
That's the key point.
I've been here about 3 years, and I would say on consumables and daily food and consumables, my USD in Ecuador, it's almost like you make a currency exchange, or you have your USD and you exchange it for EUSD, and it has a different buying power. Right. It's a less strong currency, so you have more buying power. And as the perception, because my buying power on food and daily consumables is probably based on my family, is probably 4 or 5 to 1.
Yeah, that's always the ratio I used for all these years. It's about 4 or 5 to 1. That's
like reality what it is. Yeah. So the currency has a different buying power. It has a different inflation rate. The cycle, the economic system in Ecuador is different, because of it's not tied directly to the credit market and the debt market in the West. And then when you think about other things in Ecuador, the supply chains are more simple. There's less complexity in the economic environment here, and there's other things like let's talk about some of the other things with the bureaucracy and the licensing and.
No, I really want to get into that. Before we do, though, just on a couple of points you made, right, just to kind of drive some of that stuff home. So Ecuador had a currency reset recently in 2000.
Right.
That's why, they're earlier on the curve, right? If people out there have studied money creation and understand kind of how that works, money is created. It's a debt-based currency system, so every new dollar brings new debt, right? It brings interest that has to be paid back. Here's a question for those listening at home. If all the nations in the world are debtor nations, who's the creditor nation? Right? Well, where's the? That's right. It's the money system. It's a debt-based currency system. They essentially owe it back to the central banks. But
real quick, if you guys are interested to learn more about the financial system in the West and the Federal Reserve System, and that has been mirrored across other countries in central banking. Check out the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. My boy Sean sent me that book years ago, so thanks, Sean. But if you haven't read and you really want to get a really in-depth understanding of how that system was created and how it's operating today, you'll learn a ton from that book.
If you want to watch stuff, the best person I've seen who breaks this down, in quickly and easily to understand is Mike Maloney. He has short segment videos you can watch that would explain all this stuff really well. But right, we're earlier in the curve, right? Like the US dollar is much later in the cycle of how much of the limits of how much money you can create while still maintaining the payments on the debt. Mm-hmm. Ecuador had a new currency starting in 2000. So that's why those numbers are what they are, or one of the large factors in terms of why those numbers are what they are in terms of per household or per person, both consumer debt or personal debt as well as national debt. Because it's just not the same supply. Right. So they're like two different currencies because it's not the same supply, right? In the US, you have a supply calculation, or you have you have a supply. In Ecuador, you have a much different supply. There's no printing press here. So they're not just borrowing money into existence, even though it's the same currency, which is hard to kind of wrap your head around, but it functions, like you said, it functions as a different currency here. It's a much, I guess
it's the EUSD, man. Like that's what it is.
Carlos coined the phrase. So yeah, I just want to touch on that. But yeah, in terms of the other stuff, like I think that's really important. So, one of the things that I think Ecuador engenders, offers, encourages is relaxing. Is just sort of slowing down, taking a breath. Tranquilo. That's really part of the life here in general. Now, would that be the case in Guayaquil? No. Would that be the case even in Quito? Much less. But in the rest of the country, essentially, this is a very relaxed, calm, take it slow, put the family first, put people first, help your neighbors, be polite, it's all that kind of stuff, right? And there's lots of reasons for that. Like some of it is just the culture for sure. But the spending habits of people, which is partly what you just touched on, this because people's lives are not funded by debt. In the same way, people's spending habits and patterns, as well as, fits in very well with the morals and the culture, right? So people here take life much, have an attitude towards life that's much different. They also then don't go into the same levels of debt to fund, their sort of like keep up with the Joneses lifestyle.
Well, they're living in the present. So many people are actually living in the moment, in the day, in the present, right? It's really refreshing. I mean, there's obviously a double-edged sword. Like there's some planning and prudence that is lacking because of that. But in general, the fact that people are really, truly living in the moment, most people here, that's awesome, man. It's awesome to be around. It's like, yeah.
So when you have, what you have in the West, like what you have in a place like the U.S. and much of the world is like this. What you have in the West is you have so much debt, both personal debt as well as national debt. You have so much debt that it causes this speeding up. Mm-hmm. It causes this pressure cooker. It causes this pressure that everybody feels to bring in enough income to be able to pay back all the money they owe, as well as for the government to implement enough fees and enough taxes and enough levels of places in the economy that they're extracting money that they can manage, they can keep their books, not of course not balanced, but that they can stay alive, right? That they can continue to go on. So that's what you have in the U.S. And it's like people intrinsically know, it's like you're in some city and your sink is clogged and you call a plumber and they come to your house and they're there for 15 minutes and they run the snake down and they leave and you get a bill for $150. And you intrinsically, this is not what this should cost. Well, there's a big difference there's reasons why that's $150, and that's the market price. Like that's the supply and demand price for that service. Versus why here you could get someone to come to your house and fix your drain and give them $5 or you know, or 3 or 10 would be like a lot. Maybe, you know, I'm just throwing numbers out, but not a lot of money at all. In fact, most people probably just bring it and do it as a favor. But there's a reason, right? And the difference is that this is an economy that hasn't regulated itself to death. This is an economy that is not litigious, right? So you don't have the risk of lawsuit. Therefore, you have to carry very expensive insurances. And then you don't have mandated insurances either. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the plumber back home, his car's insured, his business is insured, his workers are insured. He's got a whole bunch of licenses he has to carry the costs on. You know, he's up to here with overhead with government mandated costs, essentially, right? Here, he doesn't have any of that. So he's not worried about getting sued. He's not carrying any liability insurance of any kind for himself or his business. He doesn't have his employees, if they're on the books, which they're not going to be, but if they're on the books, they're going to take not anywhere close to the cut that you're dealing with back home. If there's any license at all, I don't think there even exists a license for a plumber here. If it does, correct me, but I don't believe that exists here. So there's no license. There's none of it, right? And so what does that do? It creates a relaxed environment. Like he's not worried about, oh my God, I gotta get 15 minutes. If I don't get out, it's right? All those costs, because if you can't operate at a certain level of efficiency, he's gonna lose money. Mm-hmm. So what does it do? It creates prices. It creates inflation. It creates prices being where they are, and it creates enormous pressure on everybody. And you end up in this society where it's sort of very transactional. It's like there's no time for small talk. People don't really care about you or your life. It's more just like get in, get out, get paid, go home, you know, and watch TV until you got to do it the next day. You know, it's like, and yeah, you just don't have that here, right? You have this sort of attitude, which is helped by the lack of debt and then the lack of over-regulation. Mm-hmm. That just creates a very different life. Now, that may suck for some people. Some people might not be into that at all because there isn't rules for everything, mm-hmm. and there isn't standard processes for everything. And the planning and efficiency is not even, you know, it's 5% as good as back home. And there's all kinds of like inconveniences and things that makes, you know, there's the downside of those things. Mm-hmm. But if you're oriented the way I am and you prefer a more free, more open, more relaxed place, like this is it.
Yeah. I mean, is there really such thing as a plumber here? Like you said?
No. I was thinking that too when I was talking.
And truly, like, most Ecuadorians are plumbers. That would be more accurate, right? That's like, there's maestros, which is a kind of a general contractor, and they know how to do kind of everything, right? Or maybe there's another term for maestro, like the worker that knows how to basically, I mean, the translation of maestro is just master, I think, right? But like, in the context of construction, it means sort of like, not the foreman almost. Foreman. That would be probably, yeah. So typically the maestro will know how to do plumbing, know how to do electricity, know how to do a little bit of everything. There probably are some workers that specialize more in one or the other, but there's not really, you never call the plumber here. You call a guy who knows how to fix plumbing, but he's not the plumber. He could probably build you a fence also and fix your electricity as well.
Right.
And he would probably, like I said, he'd probably fix your pipes just as a favor. Like that would probably not be a job he would even charge for.
Right.
You know, like you've given him work in the past. He's like, oh, you're having a problem? Like, I'll just come fix it. Right. If you want to give him something, you know, sure. And we would, of course, but like, yeah. I mean,
yeah. And maybe also this is the countryside. And that's what we're used to. Probably in the city for like a commercial building or some, you know, major, you know, high-rise building in Guayaquil. There's probably like a specialized plumber or plumbing team that will work on something like that. But out here, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, I remember even like when I was on the coast, and there was a guy who was having a problem with his pool, and he didn't speak Spanish, so he was asking me, hey, can you help me like translate? And so I was helping him, you know, with the workers that came to fix his pool. They all knew how to work on the pool. This was not a pool company at all. Like this was some guys that that do this, in addition to 10,000 other things, like you said, and they're down there like tinkering and putting in the chemicals and doing this and that, and I'm helping them translate, and like, yeah, that's just life here. You know, it's just
it's kind of funny that we don't even really have plumbers here. And in the United States, we actually have the plunge protection team for the financial systems pipes. You know, we got the Federal Reserve and the central bankers that are manipulating interest rates and Fed funds rates and reverse repos and money printing and all this money supply and all this stuff to make sure that the pipes don't get clogged. Yeah. And in here we don't even have an actual plumber.
It's great.
It's funny. But, you know, part of that, too, is most of the workers here, they didn't go to school to learn how to build. You know, there's architects and engineers these guys go to school, but most of the workers, they could build you a house, they could do your plumbing, they could fix your electricity, and they didn't really study it in school. They studied it through working in that field, right? Yeah. And over time, with more experience, you know, they become like experts in that. But it's not like they have a diploma in it either.
No. And like you said, like in the rural areas, just about anybody can work on a car a little bit, can knows agriculture well, knows construction relatively well. That's like most men in the rural parts of Ecuador, which is awesome. You know, like you can ask your friend to help you with just about anything, and like they can.
I can change a tire.
It's true that on that note, it kind of makes us feel like we're retarded for not knowing how to do some of this stuff. That's
not allowed to say that word
so
anymore.
Common sense. Sorry.
No, I'm joking. No, 100%. Yeah. Yep. Retrasado.
Retrasado. All right.
I don't know if we really have time for the hater stuff. That would take like a half an hour.
Is it really a hater?
Oh yeah. It's really,
they actually like they have hate. In their
I
hearts?
don't know. I cannot speak for their hearts. Their words indicate they may feel some hatred.
Okay, all right,
in some aspect of their consciousness.
I feel like even our haters are courteous. Most of them.
We got some courteous haters. We appreciate all haters. So yeah, I don't know if we'll get into that. We should just mention, so the VAT, the value added tax, has gone up. I'm not even sure. I think it was permanent. Is that permanent or temporary?
No, it's temporary. It's temporary to 15 for a period of time, and then they're going to reevaluate. They're saying the permanent was only approved to go from 12 to 13.
Oh, that's what it was, right.
And then an additional 2 temporary. So who knows how that actually
So the permanent, we're at 13 now permanently.
Right, but they're going to 15 first.
Right. So it's permanent 13, temporary 15.
Right.
Up from 12. And yeah, they've been trying to do this for years. They've been like literally the entire time I've been here, they've been trying to raise the VAT. It seems like if you're conspiratorially minded, I don't even know if there's much of a conspiracy, but it seems like it's one of the things that the conditions of loans is asking for, because every president continually tries to do this, and then the assembly keeps saying no, which is why the 2% is temporary, because the assembly wouldn't approve it.
Right. Sure. I think some of it goes back to what we talked about with the currency. They're not just printing money. They can't just make decisions like we do in the United States and just fund everything and all these social things because we just keep printing and we have a $34 trillion deficit. We're running a deficit because we we print the money. In Ecuador, they actually have to run it more like a business. They can't just print their way into prosperity in that way. Prosperity. Sure, right. So they, when you think about what they're doing with the violent crime and the criminal drug trade, that takes more money than they've currently outlaid. They've historically not spent that kind of money manning the prisons and militarizing some of that, and you're seeing. We have an example of the cost increase that Bukele had in El Salvador and what it takes to have this. You want less crime, you want less, organized crime and drug trade in the country. This is what it costs. So for Ecuador to actually execute that in a sustained way, because we can't just print our way into inflation, which is a better model, then they have to tax. They have to increase revenue into the country to be able to, in a sustained way, do that.
Yeah. I was going to say as well, and you guys might have heard this, correct me if I'm wrong, but the exit tax was being reduced in increment every 6 months. and they stopped that.
Yep.
So it's stopped at 3.5% now.
Oh, is that what it was? I thought they went back up to 5. No, I don't know for sure.
No, they just stopped decreasing it, but I think it's 3.5% at this point.
Okay.
It's not going back. At least my understanding is they're
Is that
just
called like salida de visas or something?
the divisas, yeah.
The visas. Yeah.
Salida
I'll
de
look that up
divisas.
real quick. I hope you're right because I'm sure you are right. You tend to remember these things well, but I thought it had gone back up to 5. But yeah, so that's a Correa era tax that Lasso promised to get rid of and did not, but they were going down incrementally, like you said. Just pulling that up here.
Did you find it?
May 30th. No, this is all old. So, all right. Well, we may have to update that next week unless Brandon
I'll find it.
magically finds it quickly here. I don't know. It's dead air time. It's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, so this is back from December of 23. That's when he maintained the 3.5% till further notice. However, I did think I recently saw a raise of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let you guys know next week concretely. And I don't know. You guys can put in the comments who's going to be right. Jesse, 5%. Carl, 3.5. Let us know.
All right.
We'll take a little poll from the comments. We'll see.
Pick your mandarina.
Pick
Mandarina grande, mandarina
Con corteza gruesa.
All right, pressure's on. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. Again, hit the like button if you haven't already. Check out the retreat in the link below.
And subscribe to the channel, guys. Give us a high five. That's like a virtual high five. They'd say, hey, we see you. We appreciate your time and what you guys are giving us. We love it. Thank you. Hit that subscribe button, please.
All right, guys, you're supposed to say stuff now.
Oh, we're done already?
We're done already. That's it.
Well, thanks for watching, guys. We truly hope to see you here one day.
So until then,
we'll see you next time.
Ciao, guys.
Take care.
Which is the central? That's the center?
Yes.
Central.
Siempre está con los micrófonos conectados.
Hi.
What'd you have for breakfast?
I had an egg sandwich.
An egg sandwich?
What'd you have for breakfast?
I made a chocolate sauce and I dipped some bananas in it.
Sounds all right. Sounds all right.
Yeah.
And did you eat the bananas whole in one bite?
No, I did a little bit of both. I would dip the banana in and eat it, or cut some pieces and go with a fork and cover them with chocolate.
This is going in. This is definitely going in. Brandon, you don't eat breakfast.
I did not eat breakfast.
I normally don't eat
I
breakfast.
don't always do, but today I did. That's why I asked.
Yeah, today I did here in front of you.
You did? Oh, yeah, I think I saw it.
You sure did.
Looked like whole wheat bread.
It was Stefano's bread. Stefano's bread.
Stefano's bread.
Organic sourdough bread.
Organic sourdoughs.
That's pretty good.
Freaking
Damn good
delicious.
bread.
Are you sure it's organic?
Well, I know the company that produces the flour.
Okay.
I don't know if it's actually truly organic, but they're definitely not.
They say
using
it is.
too much crap.
They say it's organic.
They don't on the label. It's that calamari company.
Calamari?
Yeah.
Calamari.
It's actually called kamari.
Is it Kamari? I don't think so.
Calamari is a mollusk.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I do speak English, but
it's not a mollusk actually. It's what is it?
It's a squid.
Squid.
Yeah, you got there. But
actually, it's a French word. Calmar.
Well, it's probably Italian. Calamari would be my guess.
Calamari.
Yeah.
Squid. You know, in English, you have this thing where
it's definitely like the
look
Latin.
Could be
Latin root, which is all those languages, right?
But in English, you have this thing where the animal has a name, and then the food counterpart is a French word for the animal. Do you know that?
All right, interesting. Yeah, it's see, I'm so good, bro. From Italiano, calamari. From Latin, calamarius. So I nailed the Italian and the Latin part.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
French is a Latin language.
Maximus.
All right, here we go.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel right here. Check out our real estate channel right here for content that you will absolutely love. Click right here. And if you want to know how we got here, click here.